So what are we going to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? I'll just chill here. Why did I stop taking benzodiazepines? A question that I briefly touched on in the video where I explained how and why I started taking them. Towards the end, I talked about why I stopped taking them. And I got into it a bit and I explained the main reason, but I didn't get into all the aspects of it. One reason I did not stop, I didn't have a problem with interdose withdrawal and tolerance. There are some people that experience a return of their anxiety and panic and sometimes many other physical symptoms while they're still taking the benzodiazepines. And obviously that is a very significant reason to stop taking them. When they stop working for you or you find that you have to keep upping the dosage. I didn't have that problem. The main reason I stopped taking them that I mentioned in the previous video is that life had really lost its color. Everything had sort of flatlined. And it was true that benzodiazepines, they kind of capped how bad I could feel in terms of when it came to anxiety, stress, and panic, things related to increased neural activity. It prevented me from going too low, but it also prevented me from going too high. It's like it put a ceiling on how much of life I could take in. And life just kind of became this monotone. Just flat, colorless. The phenomenon of emotional blunting was very relevant to my case. My ability to feel things, how I was around my family and my friends, things that would normally make someone sad or happy or, just a more dynamic range of emotions that you would expect as a reaction from certain things just weren't happening. My creativity when it comes to imagination and creativity, dreams, all of that was just, like a void. It was just gone. And I was someone, and I feel like I'm really getting it back now, that did have a creative muscle in my brain. I mean, we all do, but it was something that was very important to me, and I had completely lost it. It was just gone. So that was, that kind of flatlining, this gray scale of life was major motivation. And I also mentioned learning about withdrawal a bit, although I didn't look into the tapering as much as I should have, which was unfortunate for me, but I did start learning a bit about withdrawal, which that was terrifying in the sense that I realized if I was going to get off these things, the longer I waited to get off of them, potentially the worse the withdrawal could be. So that increased my motivation to get off of them. But there were a couple other things that happened. One, I had a really bizarre and at the time horrific injury, pneumothorax, or a collapsed lung, as it's commonly known. I was skateboarding, and in some ways I'm a little bit old to be skateboarding, but I was also just in terrible physical shape. And part of the reason I was in terrible physical shape was because of the benzodiazepines. There's a lot of evidence that there's a certain amount of loss of muscle mass, a certain amount of atrophy that happens. It's harder to be in good physical shape when we're taking benzodiazepines. And there's some physiological reasons for that. because of the drugs themselves, and there's also the fact that it, my motivation and energy levels, I had kind of this just more or less chronic fatigue that was not debilitating in the sense that I couldn't go out of the house and live life, but motivation to do kind of, physical activity beyond a certain level, it was really lacking. On this particular day, I was motivated enough to skateboard, and it only lasted about 5 minutes because I had this really bizarre fall in which I kind of like broke the fall with my wrist, but a lot of the brunt of the fall was kind of taken by my upper body, like shoulder, torso area, and there was this growing, searing, unbelievable pain. I couldn't catch my breath. Of course, I have a lot of health anxiety, and it was right around where my heart was, so I thought I could be having a heart attack. And I went to the emergency room, and I was diagnosed with a collapsed lung. It was a very bizarre injury, and the doctor even said, well, the doctor was surprised that it happened, even though I was doing something physical and I did fall. It was just, the doctor himself found it unusual. It's the first time I'd ever had. He asked me repeatedly, he's like, is this something you've had before? Because sometimes people that have pneumothorax or a collapsed lung, they've had it before. No, this is the first time I've ever had an injury like this, and he was quite surprised by it. 3 days in hospital. Came out from that. I haven't had a problem since, touch wood, but it was kind of something later on when I was reading about benzodiazepines and about the withdrawal. I actually started looking into some of these other side effects that are not so widely spoken about that happen while you're taking them. So that a little red flag went up there. The akathisia episode I experienced. So I basically, for 24 hours, well, a bit less than 24 hours, I experienced what cold turkey withdrawal was like. And that happened in Cape Verde. Well, it actually happened in Senegal, really. But I was coming back from a trip, leading a trip with clients, with my friend, my business partner, associate. And I got COVID on Cape Verde. I ended up having to be quarantined for 10 days. It was obligatory. There was absolutely no choice. I was stuck in this hotel room. My anxiety was through the roof because I was in this tiny little room. I could not leave. Absolutely could not leave. I ended up taking a higher dose of the benzo I had with me, and because I'd only brought so much, the trip was only so many days. Now the trip had had 10 days added onto it, plus I was taking more than normal, so even the little bit extra that I brought, it ended up getting exhausted by the last day. The last 24 hours I had run out. And I thought, no big deal, I'll just go 24 hours without having a benzodiazepine. I also drank excessively to celebrate getting released from this quarantine, which was exceptionally stupid. I cannot stress that enough. Jesus Christ. Let's say 8 hours afterwards, it was like a delayed fuse. I experienced akathisia for the first time, which for me, akathisia, I've made a couple videos about it. It's the worst symptom that I've experienced during benzo withdrawal. This was my first taste of it. I had no idea what was going on. The physical and mental torture of akathisia is like few other things, but maybe nothing else, honestly. I think it's one of the most awful physical states we can be in as a human being. It's honestly, it's incredibly hard to articulate what it feels like, but it's indescribable physical, mental terror. Absolute terror. I mean, people describe it as being tortured from the inside out. It is 100% that. So I had this episode of akathisia, which was caused by basically cold turkey, not having benzodiazepines. The drinking obviously did not help, but if it had just been a hangover, I would not have experienced the akathisia. Ended up getting checked into a hospital, getting a massive intravenous dose of Valium. Still had no idea about akathisia at the time. It was later on that I looked into this possibility during withdrawal, this, certain symptoms that you could experience, particularly during cold turkey, like seizures being on the, if akathisia on the end of the spectrum of restlessness, akathisia is kind of on the more mild end, which is insane to even imagine. Seizures would obviously be full blast, your neural activity just spiraling completely out of control. So that got me really worried, because then, I'm living in West Africa. There were all these supply chain issues worldwide during COVID. I ended up switching to ativan merely because they ran out of Valium in Bamako. And so this really got me thinking about the fact that, I could buy these things over the counter, which is insane, but they wouldn't let you like stock up, buy boxes and boxes. And anyway, the possibility of these things running out and me having to deal with that akathisia, that was a very terrifying prospect. And it made me realize also that I'd become completely beholden to these things. I absolutely had to have them every day. And if I stopped, there was a huge fucking catastrophe lurking around the corner. Not around the corner. It would be right there in my face the moment I stopped taking these things. So that was an incredible motivating factor to get off of them. So it was really all of those things put together. The physical deterioration, the chronic fatigue, the loss of imagination, creativity, the emotional blunting, this flatlining of life, and then the fear of withdrawal, and also the fear of running out of something that I was now completely dependent on. In a way that once I experienced the akathisia, it was just not an option. That option could not be on the table. Oh, if I run out, I'll just have to deal with that akathisia again. Fuck no. And I did end up experiencing akathisia again during withdrawal. They were shorter episodes, and thankfully they did go away. But if I had not tapered, even though my taper was inadequate, bonjour, ça va? If I had not done any taper at all, if I had stopped cold turkey, then I would have been plunged into that akathisia world in a way I could not have imagined. So deliberately getting off of benzodiazepines on my own terms, even if my taper was inadequate, gave me a chance to at least have a bit more control over those symptoms. I say all of this with absolutely no judgment to anyone that is on benzodiazepines, long-term or for life. Anyone that has to take benzodiazepines because they're dealing with something like chronic akathisia, I would be doing the same thing. If I had akathisia that could not be remedied in any other way, you better believe I'd be taking benzos for the rest of my life. And even if it's not akathisia, if it's some other issue, burden that's related to increased neural activity that's overwhelming and debilitating in such a way that you can't get off, I understand. But if you want to get off, for most of us, there is a path. You might not see it right now, but there's a path for most of us to get off. I'm gonna go look for some birds.